Today in the podcast, we're going to be talking about dumping the info dump. So make sure and stay tuned. It's going to be a good one today.
Welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey to publication. I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
I'm Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
I'm Christina Catane, and I write Christian fantasy.
You know, I was feeling so just silly that I almost was like, welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. I don't even know why. And I was like, well, maybe we need to save that for the next or April Fool's Day or something. But
anyway, we're all sad the whole time.
I know.
Just sit here and stare at each other. Don't make a sound.
But it's difficult to do because this day is my favorite day of the week. It's so great to get together with you ladies and with all of our friends watching live and chatting in the chat. If you want to be a part of that, tune in at 10 a.m. Eastern. We have Catherine Carroll already saying a good morning to us, and Maria Johnson is with us. Thanks for joining us, Maria. I know she's been busy in a couple ones she's had to miss. It's real good to have you. But we do appreciate you in our live chatters who add so much to the discussion. Hi, Shell. And we do appreciate those of you who can't come to see us at 10 a.m. on Friday and who listen to us later on any platform that podcasts are made available. Good morning, Teresa. Oh, it's good to see everybody. We're glad you're here.
Liz and is here too. Oh, and there's Gigi.
There's Gigi. Hi, Gigi. Hi, Liz. And we go around the virtual table every week with the question, what's up? So we can find out what's up with our podcast hosts. And Tina, what's up with you?
Well, I've been writing, which is good.
Yay.
And I've been implementing my new system I came up with, and it's working really well. So I'm really happy about that. And I just wanted to say, I really miss that redheaded freckled girl in that intro video.
Yeah, she's real cute. It's like every time I watch that video, I do have a little pang for our fourth host, Miss Rhonda, who's been battling some health issues and has not been able to join us for several weeks.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just things are just chugging along smoothly.
That's awesome.
Not a lot to report.
All right. Well, anybody who wants to put in the chat, what's up with you this week? We'd love to hear about it. My what's up this week is going to be a show and tell episode. Sometimes I do like to do show and tell on occasion. And this I would like to share as a lovely gift of encouragement that I got from somebody who I'm going to keep anonymous because I didn't get permission to tell
I'm going to make you full screen so that I think I can do that.
Yes. So, sorry everybody, because like the writing on there it's not backwards, is it? Mm-hmm. So as you can see, it says all of these things you are, and then it tells you a descriptive word and a verse to reinforce the fact that that's who you are biblically and in the eyes of God. And I really appreciate it. It keeps my coffee nice and hot for a very long time and keeps me safe from spilling it all over everything because it has a lid. So I really appreciate that gift of encouragement. Thank you so much, mysterious benefactor. And that's my show and tell. What's up with you this week, Jen?
Before I do, let's go to our chat. And here's what I've been waiting for. We've been waiting forever for this. What's up? Gigi said, I published.
Yay!
Gigi.
We are so happy to finally get to celebrate you, Gigi. Yeah. For those of you that have not been around here long, Gigi has been with us for a while. She's been a supporter of everybody else. She's been a cheerleader for us, for other writers, an encourager, and she has finally crossed the finish line, finally pushed that button and is published. And we are so happy for you, Gigi. Congratulations.
Yes, absolutely. It's a big milestone. And there was some trepidation and all of this stuff. And so if you could support Gigi as she makes this big milestone, we would really, I'm sure she would appreciate it too.
And speaking of appreciate, Gigi, we've read your dedication to us in your book and made us all cry. And we just appreciate you so much. And just the fact that we could be at all involved in helping you in your career. We just are blessed. So thank you. We're blessed to have you in our life. And you blessed us by sharing that in your dedication. So thank you.
Very,
And
very
I
honored.
started reading her book last night, and so we need to get this podcast over, so I can go finish.
I know. I need to find a hot minute where I can just sit down and not be interrupted and read. I can't tell you last time I read when I wasn't like doing dishes and had it read to me, or like I want to just really sit down and read her book. So
It was one of those things where I was like, oh, I got the podcast tomorrow. I have to go to sleep.
so you had to put the book down.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Maria says her what's up. She's deep in the edits of book 4 still, getting into the middle of the novel now. It's also not terrible, so bonus for that. That's good.
Not terrible is a good place to be.
Especially when it comes to edits.
Yeah, right. Lots of people like, so Liz likes your cup, Jamie, and we got some congratulations in here for Gigi. Catherine Carroll says, what's up? She tore apart her manuscript and have been stitching it together with a new timeline. I've done that before too. So that hurts sometimes, but it's usually needed. So my what's up, I don't know which one to do. There's just so much going on
you
this
were
week.
saying like life sounds a little bit like a whirlwind.
Yeah. So my girls have a formal event tonight. It's called Fancy Game Night, and it is kind of a big deal. It's like there are game shows that will happen on the stage, and they are legit with the technology and the graphics and stuff, and it's gonna be a lot of fun, but it's formal. You go, and it's like there's waiters and everyone wait on the teens. It's for teenagers. And so we are going to get the hair done today. It's the first time we've done this. We homeschool, so my girls have not done any like formal events where we would go and buy a dress and do your hair and like that. And so I guess that's my best what's up. I don't really want to talk about the fact that my laundry room is currently flooding behind me over here, and I have a bunch of towels stopping it. And that my husband had to work overtime, so he's not here to fix it. Normally I'd be like, oh, Randy, and then I just go do my thing. And I thought I did something good, and I think I made it worse. And so poor guy is not going to be happy when he comes back. But
it was funny because when we sat down to do our pre-show stuff, you were like, so I just threw a towel down to worry about it later. And I'm like, throw a towel down and worry about it later is such a like mom's duct tape. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, because you have to learn how to put out what fires you can, right? Like the podcast isn't going to wait. And like I have like, so the problem is that last night, my husband works nights. Right now, he is. I guess I shouldn't have admitted that live because weirdos are out there. But don't worry, I can protect myself. That's all I'm gonna say. Don't come knocking in my door at night. So my daughter woke me up. She's like, "There's something wrong with the washing machine," because I made them wash their coats because it's gonna be like below 0 tonight. And so I don't care how pretty you look, you're wearing your winter coat. Like it's gonna be cool. But like they've worn them all winter. So I'm like, let's wash them at least so they don't look so dirty or whatnot. And so they washed them, but like it wouldn't finish the load. It's been crazy. So I had to get that finished. Like they cannot leave the house without a winter coat, you know. So I had to like keep trying to make the washer work. And now it's flooding and it's just so great. So anyway, so Gigi says the writing community is this writing community is the absolute best. Thank you for all the support. Humbling. Oh, thank you. You're the biggest cheerleader for everybody else. So I don't know why you're humbled by this. We just appreciate you so much.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. That's it. That's all I got.
All righty. And we have Jess Glidden also joining us. We're so happy that you were able to join us. And Jen, hopefully things are a little less crazy for you as the week goes on. Good night. All right.
I think that the week is going to get worse, to be honest. I don't want to detail everything we've got coming up. Like we've got a lot going on this month. I don't want to detail all that because it's just as boring for anybody else. But hopefully we can get the washer situation situated, and then I will, hopefully my husband's not listening to this right now because he worked overtime, but sometimes he likes to watch and listen. He finds us very entertaining. He's not a writer, but he laughs at us. So he might be listening right now. So sorry, honey.
Well, somebody should laugh at us.
Yeah. At us, with us, near us, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to transition into our topic of the day. And the topic is dumping the dump. And it's funny because I just now thought like Valentine's Day is coming around the corner, and sometimes you want to break up with someone before Valentine's Day comes around. So how about we ditch info dumping just in time so we don't have to buy any chocolates or flowers for info dumping. So let's
really info dumping is just so high maintenance. Not a good date at all.
Yeah, it's red flags everywhere. Okay, so but what do we mean even when we talk about info dumping? Anybody care to read this handy definition we plucked from the Cambridge Dictionary?
Sure.
Go ahead, Jen.
It says the practice of giving too much information at the same time. And then it gives some examples. Did you want me to read the examples too?
Yes, it also says, or a piece of writing that does this.
The piece is a massive, unenlightening info dump containing paragraph after paragraph of brain-bending detail. Any writer must balance info dump with telling the reader too little.
Okay, so I think that we could probably all. I feel like it's kind of, I know it when I see it. I wouldn't necessarily say that a particular author comes to mind who's famous for info dumping, but I will say that, hilarious. Sorry about that, but our chatters are not disappointing. Jess Glidden says swipe left on info dumping.
I like Liz's too.
Liz says info dumping. It's not me. It's you.
That's awesome.
Oh,
yes.
That's gold.
So none of us like it, right? I mean, is this
we hate
universal?
we hate it as a reader, right? We hate it as a reader, but how can we sometimes do it as writers, right? Because maybe we just don't know what we don't know. Or, like I've heard people say, well, they're just bad writers. Okay, no, maybe they're just not good editors. Right. So
good.
Like, yeah. So we got to figure out, like, we kind of know what it is when we see it. Right. But like, you asked me a question in the planning session.
Yeah. Because
do you remember what the question was?
Yeah, because you write historical, right? And it would seem to me that I've read many different kinds of historical fiction, and some of them are really heavy, making sure you know that this is not a modern scene. You know what I mean? Like everything is talked about. The water, I don't know, is in a pitcher and poured into a basin as they wash their whatever. And then some people who write historical include fewer details. Like you would maybe even only know it was historical because the language feels a little archaic and they're not saying stuff like word, So
and I
do you
need
think
to be
that
somewhere in the middle for a good,
Yeah.
So you were asking me like if I thought that historical writers, whether it's romance or not, if historical writers seem to be more at risk or if it needs to be done. And I said that my answer was two parts, really. I feel like that, yes, we might be more at risk, but I think that that's just because we feel this obligation to teach everybody about the time period. I think it needs to be a good balance, but I think that other genres are just as much at risk. Because if I'm like, all right, so an example was if I was reading a football romance a while back, and the person was giving us all kinds of details about the game of football that were not interesting if you aren't interested in football, and it did not move the story forward. Like it was just a lot. And then I read another one, like I just felt like the whole book was like she kept trying to just make it more sportsy. And then I read another one where the characters like I think it was kind of like they're both similar. There was like they had to wash a jersey or whatever, and the first one washed the jersey, and it was like all the details about the stitching and like how the shirt was made. Who cares, right?
Ugh.
The second one, she had to wash his shirt, and it wasn't a jersey, but he pulled his shirt off. Of course, like it's a romance, right? So and it was a clean romance, just so you know. He pulled his shirt off, and all of a sudden she gasped. Because he was bruised all over these, like on his like torso. There's all these bruises. And she was like, she went to touch one and then she pulled her hand back. And and the whole scene was about that. This is his job. This is what he does. And it was a sensitive moment where all of a sudden she like wanted to like him not to be hurt and wanted to like help him. And then it was like this moment of them looking at each other with her like almost touching him. And then she backed off. That scene was so much better and told me so much more about who this person is as a football player than talking about like all these extra details that did not move the story forward. That moved the story forward. That like was a pinch point for these two characters who acted like they didn't like each other, you know, and or she acted like she didn't like him. He was full on loving her, right? So again, before, like, I feel like historical, yes, probably is more at risk, but other genres gotta be careful too.
Yeah.
I know that, I think it's strengths related somewhat too, because like I love learning and I love teaching. And so like in my first book, there were ptarmigan in my first book that I substituted for the doves. And so there was a lot of stuff that I had learned over the years about how the sacrifices were done in the temple and like what the most holy of holies was, and that I could have just dumped onto everybody because like it's fascinating to me. And I could have said, and the willow ptarmigan was the Alaska state bird.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like, but guess what? People who are from Alaska who are reading my book already know that the willow ptarmigan is the Alaska state bird, and I don't need to tell them that. And then they're gonna get that like warm fuzzy of, oh, I know something.
Right.
And the people that don't know don't care.
Right. And plus there's that whole adage, like, you can only teach so much. Like, as a former teacher and someone who has taken a lot of like public speaking classes and courses in college, like, there's a reason why they have a 3-point sermon, or there's like a 5-paragraph essay kind of a structure, is because you like, I sat through and I say sat through a sermon in the past year where the person had spent the whole week studying, which was, you know, great. Like, I love that they didn't wait until the last minute, right? But because that happens too, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You know, we used to tease my grandpa about his bathroom being his office, because Saturday night he spent a lot of time in there with his Bible, right? So,
maybe that's just when stuff was happening.
But he was so excited about what he was studying, and he had such a good spirit, but it was just too much. He just kept presenting more stuff, and he went an hour over. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, because he was just so excited about the stuff, but I remember nothing from it. And I have input really high and learner pretty high. So if I wasn't getting anything, you know, everyone else was just like not paying attention at all. Right. And so there's also that point too, is that you got to just like, the teaching isn't, if you want, you can teach in your writing and you can share information about like either like the past or whatever the scene is for your book, but you got to be careful, because you can't teach too much, because people are not going to gather it all in their heads.
Well, I think that's a really good transition to how do you actually avoid doing this, right? Because you don't want to fall victim of this, and yet you feel like, yeah, but won't my story lack flavor and be too short? Isn't this a way that I can add words to my too short book? So how would you avoid the dreaded info dump, ladies?
Well, I think kind of like what Tina was getting at too, is you have to decide really what your readers really need to know.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what moves your story forward?
Yes. So like, do they really, like with her bird example, they really need to know the name of the bird, right? So that helps without repeating what, remember they're in Alaska, by saying that the bird, it gives more to the setting, but they don't need to know all the details about the bird. Because how many times have I put a book down to go research something because I was interested? A lot, because that's my strength. But other people are just going to read it, right? So you just got to remember that there's going to be all different types of people that are reading it. So,
and to Jamie's point about people just wanting to put it in there because they need more words, if you don't have enough words, then you don't have enough story.
Right. It's not adding more words.
You don't need to add information. You need to add story.
Right. Meaning, like, maybe you don't have enough subplot or side character and things that are happening to your, which again goes back to plotting and story structure. We have a lot of episodes on that. Right. And then people that are discovery writers, you still have an idea in your head where the story is flowing. So you just need to go back and visit that, your ideas of like how, like all the things that the story that's supposed to be happening. So,
well, and to go back to Jen's football story. And something you briefly touched on, Tina, is does it move the ball down the field? Har, har, har. Does it advance the story? Is it important? Right. So saying that there was a ptarmigan is important for setting and all of that kind of stuff. But deciding to not put in all of the rest of it is a choice that you make because it doesn't do anything to advance the plot. And it may, in fact, pull the reader right out and slow things down to a dreary pace.
And that's where they shut your book and don't finish it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. Agreed. So one of the things I make sure I do is I try to work the information into dialogue.
It's a good trick.
But it has to be natural.
Yes.
Because there's nothing worse than like if I write a story about me and Tina and Jamie and I say, well, Tina and Jamie, remember when we first started our writing group called Flaws, which means the Fellowship of Ladies and Writing Society. You guys know that. I'm not going to say all that.
Well, I often forget and have to look it up, but I get your point.
Yeah. but I would not talk to you ladies that way. Right. Your dialogue needs to be, no matter what your setting is, it needs to be authentic to the time period in your book, and it needs to be natural. So if you can fit the information in a way that like a conversation with somebody that doesn't know the information, and you can share it without it being too info dumpy, then that's a good way of doing it. But here's my thing too, if that conversation exists only to get that information in, then you're probably info dumping, no matter how artfully you try to do it. If the conversation does not move the story forward, if it only exists just so you can get that information in, then it's probably info dumpy.
Unless you need that information.
Instance.
Right. And it moves the story forward, and it's at a point in the story that would shift things or whatever. Yes.
I just wrote a scene this week where one of my characters had to kill an animal that was injured and put it out of its misery. But it was a large moose with large rack of antlers. And so they had to use a spear. Mm-hmm. And instead of like having a whole thing about how you throw a spear, I had my character say, and he could hear his father's voice in his head, left foot forward, arms straight, point your toe toward the target. Mm-hmm. And like had like those 3 things from the instructions of how to throw a spear just to make it feel authentic. And then that was it. Because I could have put a whole lot more if I wanted to really teach you how to throw a spear properly.
Right. I wrote an example. So here's a bad example. Well, Gene Smith, back when you and I were in college at Boston University on Commonwealth Avenue, we enjoyed pizza at 712 Commonwealth Avenue. You wouldn't say that. We'd say, hey, remember the pizza at 712? Laura asked. Gene's stomach growled at the mention of their old college hangout. Yep, my favorite thing about BU. And then you can be inside their head and give some, when they went to college and blah, 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 like you can give a little bit of information there, but you've given a ton in a very natural way that you don't have to then repeat in a paragraph. So
yes. And watch for head hopping in these instances. So if you are writing from Gene's point of view, you have to be careful that it's Gene who recollects the pizza place in Boston. So just be careful with that. But it's a very good trick to lob a very vague sort of a sentence at the person and then explain it with internal from the character point of view of the chapter. Very good trick.
And then a trick to try to avoid too is try not to do the mirror. Like looking in a mirror and the person looks at themselves and looks at their brown eyes and looks at their brown hair, because we don't really do that when we look in a mirror. So try not to. I know that like it probably can be done, but
just try not to.
I read a book recently that had multiple point of view characters, and every one of them looked at the mirror at some point in the book.
Right.
Yeah. And it was so noticeable to me as a writer. Like it stuck out like a sore thumb. But I wonder if it would have to the readers. Like, I don't know that, but to me, I was like, oh boy, here we go again, gazing at ourselves in the mirror.
Liz says, all the little tidbits only I know. Imagine myself sharing if one day someone interviews me about my book. I think that too. And I will try to take notes about things, and I can put it in the back of the book with my, I always do a back of the book kind of like talking about the book. So that's a good thing to share. It could also be blog posts if you want to blog. It can be put in letters to your your email for your newsletter, like extra information. I mean, it's not wasted knowledge for sure. And Maria says, or they can look it up. Google exists. I know, right? That's what I was saying. Like I would put something in there just sometimes and it just triggers people to go to Google for sure. So,
well, it's interesting that I know you're going to read Jess's comment, but then Maria starts to talk a little bit about genre, which is what we're going to cover next. So what does Jess's comment say?
Jess says, I got advice on first critique that I was repeating information. It wasn't intentional. I just felt passionate about the topic, and the advice I was given was to trust your reader. That's very true.
Very good advice.
Let your reader figure things out on their own too, whenever you can. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. So now down here to fantasy. Maria says, fantasy is stereotypically not the best at this. I've read novels where they just want to get across every single fact about their world. Lore is awesome, but it needs to move the story forward. Agreed.
There you go. And that was what my original question was. Are there some genres where people sort of expect you to info dump? And arguably my biggest argument was in mystery. And I'm talking primarily the traditional mystery where there's a detective and a whole bunch of suspects. And the detective, like Poirot, he'll go and he'll interview a lady, and the lady will say, oh yeah, Mrs. Cotswold was my employer for 55 years until she divorced her husband, but then he died under mysterious circumstances, and we always wondered if he was poisoned. And it's like, what? Like completely these suspects all info dump, and it's absolutely what is expected to happen in that genre. Like nobody blinks an eye about it. And so just like all the other advice we kind of give, we're going to trust our listener, right? In the same way that we're asking you to trust your reader, that you're going to recognize if this is something that is important in your genre.
And it could be argued in those cases that those info dumps are necessary to move the story forward because there are clues hidden in there.
Mm-hmm.
And red herrings.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, flashbacks are another way that you can give information if they're done well and not done too often. I've done flashbacks in for sure in Esther's story. There's flashbacks that were necessary. But as long as it's not overdone and it's done well, flashbacks can be used too. But again, careful. It's got to move the story forward. It's got to be like a really important part. So
yeah, high fantasy was another one Maria had brought up. Tolkien just said it, but then again, he was Tolkien. So
and I don't read sci-fi, but we used to be in a writing group with a guy who wrote hard sci-fi, and I don't know if he was a good example or not, but lots of info dumping there, but maybe it was just him.
Yeah, I mean, some people who read that stuff really want to know that you know your stuff about rocket boosters and that you know how much, this chemical and that chemical and their reaction and what and arguably it is important to info dump in hard sci-fi, arguably.
So, and if you're going to read Jane Austen, then you just know you're going to know way more about the draperies and the wallpaper and the dresses and the materials they're made out of than you ever wanted to.
Right. And I would argue that if you want to write just like Jane Austen, that's fine. When you get your time machine and you can go back to that time period, you can write just like her. But if you want to publish books right now,
exactly,
you need to probably be careful with it. But how do you know if you're info dumping, right? So we talked about all this stuff, but or how do you find out if it's you, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about drafts, or like we talked about editing. I think early on I said they're not a bad writer, they're a bad editor, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, your first draft, you should just shut off the editor and dump away because I mean, you get it down there and then you go back and you whittle away at everything until it is a piece of art.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. And I think I've got this piece of advice too. And I don't think we ever talked about it in any of our editing episodes, but it is something I do. You take a highlighter and go through as you're reading it and highlight the paragraphs that have info. And if you find that there's lots of big chunks that are highlighted, then you're info dumping. And especially if it's a lot. If you have one in your whole book that is like that and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it, it just needs to be that way, well, you know what, you do you. But if you find that throughout your whole book, then it's an issue and you need to stop and take some time and edit that and see how you can make that better. So
well,
and then,
I think
and then conversations too. Sorry, one last thing. Revisit your conversation. Read out loud. I always say that when you're editing. Read out loud the conversations. And if they don't sound natural, if they sound like people would never, you would not have that conversation with your friend, then you're info dumping.
So. Yeah, Jen, I think that is the biggest, most glaring use of info dumping that really bothers a reader, because if you have just paragraphs of description or something, the reader's eyes, well, I can kind of glaze over. But when you're trying to read a dialogue that's just stilted and weird, it's not pleasant to read either. It does not have music to it, if for lack of a better phrase. Yeah.
No, I love that. Yeah. It doesn't have music to it.
And if you're me, you don't just do what they said and edit later. Write about 500 words and then you go back and you look for those. But it's the same process.
Right.
It's just in small, little, tiny chunks.
All right. And if you, we barely chipped the surface of all of the great comments that are going on in our live chat. So we really appreciate all of your participation. There's some really good advice in here. So we appreciate that. But I think
we have one more that we have to share before
we
move on. And it was way back at the beginning when we had a conversation about dumping. And Maria said, one of the meanest I've heard, info dumping. Welcome to Dumpsville. Population you. That's awesome. I didn't know there were so many funny dumping lines. It's so great. See, I learn things every week from our chatters.
I know. Our live chat is amazing. Thank you all for participating. Yeah. All right. Have we said all we want to say about it's not me, it's you, info dumping?
I've said everything I want to say. Goodbye. That's the end of this podcast. Thanks for joining us.
No, we have to read our sprints. But Jen,
do we?
Jen, you how do you feel about what you wrote today? Because we had rather uninspiring few moments before the podcast where we were like, are we done chit chatting and we're going to actually sprint because we don't want to?
Well, I did not write a romance.
Oh,
but I like what I wrote. It'll probably never show up anywhere, but I like it. So,
but why do we sprint? Do we sprint so that we have something publishable?
No. Sometimes. There's a lot of sprints in my books. A lot of my books are made up from sprints, but this is just one that won't. But I did some writing today and I enjoyed it. And
you worked out your writing muscle, right?
Yes. And hopefully you will all enjoy it too.
Yay. Well, what was the prompt?
All right. So we had 5 words today. My favorite is always just words, but captain, jungle, teacher, courtesy, leftovers, and I only use 2 after giving the ladies a hard time because I'm the only one that tries to use the words. I only use 2 today, but okay. All right, here we go. Someone took my lunch again. Marnie looked up, turkey sandwich halfway to her mouth. Again? Lisa shut the fridge door and nodded. Yep, Alicia had the courtesy to leave me a thank you note. Marnie laughed, then sobered when Lisa waved a hot pink Post-it in front of her. You're not kidding. A note? Really? What does it say? Thanks for the lunch. It was good, but could use a little more salt. The nerve, Marnie said. We really need to set up a camera in here to catch the criminal. She slid half of her sandwich toward Lisa. No, thank you, she said, pulling a sack lunch from her purse. I planned ahead. Wait, you brought 2 lunches? I knew the first one would get stolen. That's so unfair. That's it. I'm getting a camera. We don't need a camera in the lunchroom. How else are we going to catch this guy? Lisa shrugged. Just keep an eye on the entrance to the bathroom today. Marnie's sandwich stopped mid-bite again. The bathroom? How will that help? Lisa smiled as she unwrapped her tuna salad croissant. Because the leftovers I placed in the fridge didn't need more salt. They needed less laxatives.
Oh. Was our theme dumping today?
Are we allowed to say that on the Christian Indie Writers?
I don't know.
We've been saying dumping all this time with another meaning. Yeah, I have no idea why I wrote that. That's just what came up from those words. I don't know.
Well, I appreciate it. I think because you have Marnie in this world where there's lots of potential for interaction with coworkers, and you, it's a very convenient and also interesting world to explore. So thanks for sharing that. I liked it.
And if it was Catherine a romance, sorry, go ahead.
She says that's exactly what I was thinking she should do.
Yes,
I know, right?
Our fantasies, yes.
If I was writing that romance, if it was a romance and I was writing it, it would totally be the guy she has the crush on.
If it was a romance and you would be writing it, that's exactly how it would go. Also.
But he would be eating Marnie's. Like he likes to give Marnie a hard time, not someone else. It would have been
Mhm.
so I could rewrite it. That would be actually very funny if it was Marnie and Marnie did that and found out that it was him. So
That's funny.
Shell says, "Wow, Jen, ruthless. I love it."
Mhm.
Liz Henderson says, "Ruthless is a better word than harsh." Gigi, Jen, Gigi says, "Jen, that was awesome. What a plot twist." Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate that.
Yes.
All
Thanks.
right.
And Jen, good job with the writing prompt. I think that if anybody in the chat would like to take a stab at the writing sprint, we would love to see it in the Facebook group. So go ahead and use these same 5 words, set a timer for 15 minutes, and then share with us if you want, or just know that you did your writing workout today. Good for you. All right.
Whoops.
Yeah.
That was an accident. I hit my space bar.
Okay.
All right, Jamie, what did you write today?
All right, here we go. Jennifer added a last impromptu prompt, which is aye, Captain.
And I didn't even do it.
So
Sorry.
look for the bonus prompt in my story, although I only use like 2 of the original prompt words. Okay, here we go. And now back to Captain McGee and friends. The television announcer was unrealistically cheerful. At least she was from my perspective. I shivered and pulled my blanket up, even though I had the thermostat set to 78. There was just no help for feeling cold and miserable on a day like today, when no sun came in, no matter how wide you opened the blinds. Keeping them open only made you feel colder. In fact, as the dreary landscape reminded you, there was still 6,042 days left until summer. The baby squeaked and I lifted the blanket to check on him. He'd fallen asleep while nursing and must have been dreaming of something, or maybe the little peep was the response of milk moving through his quite new little digestive system. In any case, he didn't seem overheated or uncomfortable, so I dropped the blanket again. As Captain McGee and his friends disembarked to explore the remote jungles of Somewhere Land, my 2 girls sat watching. The big girl was nothing from this vantage point but a heap of messy bedhead atop a pair of footed pajamas.
Mm-hmm.
The middle one had stripped down to her pull-up and a pair of socks in protest to the jungle-like atmosphere I had created in our home. I had to admit there was something cozy about the scene in my living room at the moment. Mama hen and her chicks. Mama deer and her fawns. Or something. Aye, aye, Captain, the crew shouted, and then waited for my girls, and the other children no doubt also turned into the same program to respond. My kids weren't the type to play along, so the room was silent for a moment, save for the unmistakable sounds that signal the beginning of the classic hit, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. My girls both looked at me. I knew what they were thinking. We know this song, don't we? Yep, I'd raised them right. I grabbed the remote and turned the volume up. As the first A Whim Away dropped, my family room was suddenly a dance party for 2. They jumped and giggled, clasping hands and twirling for a good portion of it. I thought about my mother-in-law's snide comment about us not being able to afford a coffee table and thought about sending her a video of this action, but I knew she wouldn't approve of the disheveled appearance of her precious grandbabies. Her loss. Instead, I watched the scene and tucked it away in my heart to be relived on a day in the future when the weather would be sunny and bright, but my living room colder than a tomb and devoid of the light and love and laughter.
Oh, so good,
Wow.
Jamie. And then
Thanks.
you kick me in the face at the end there. So well written. Like I felt like I was there. And what mom can't relate to this, picture? Like my kids were more disheveled than they were cute and tidy, for sure, all growing up. And so I totally relate with this story. And the older my kids get, like it really is hitting me. Like I really look around and think, well, what is this life going to be like when they're off at college or when they're married? And so that was really good.
Thanks.
My youngest just moved out on New Year's Day. Texted me in the middle of the night last night to tell me he gets his first paycheck today for his new life out on his own.
That's
And
awesome.
it's very, very quiet around here, except on Fridays when my daughter brings the baby and I go get my other granddaughter and we have girls' night every Friday. But other than that, it's, there's no little kids dancing around. And yeah, I miss that.
Yeah, I really
Mhm.
thought that baby Ellie was going to make an appearance on the show today. A little
You
disappointed
know,
that your what's up wasn't
if I
her. Just
had if
saying.
I had had the idea of show and tell before Jamie did it, I might have. She's asleep, so we wouldn't want to wake her up anyway.
All right. Shell says, love it, Jamie. Little window into real life and packed with so much emotion. Agreed. Teresa says, so sweet, Jamie. Catherine says, way to paint a scene, Jamie. Agreed. And Jess said, got cold with your description, Jamie. Oh, and goodness, every mom has been in that scene. Our babies grow too fast. A dance party always makes the day better, but now I'm sad and need one. I know. Agreed.
Oh man, turn on The Lion Sleeps Tonight and you
We could
will
have a
cheer up.
Zoom dance party.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And I have to say, Catherine Carroll, I did notice I love your signature as your picture. It's a really cool, like, kind of logo. Really neat. Thanks, everyone. I love Fridays. I love the words of affirmation. What did you write for us today, Tina?
Well, I didn't use any of the words. And mostly because this new process I'm using, like when I'm done writing for the day, I write out like bullet points of what I want to write the next day.
Mhm.
And then my intellection like chews on it and chews on it and chews on it. And I just couldn't put any, like that was all that was in my brain. And so I had to write it. Like I couldn't get anything else written till I got it out. And it's just like a filler. Like I was reading back through, like going, and there was like this place I needed a filler scene. And so that's all it is. So I feel like following you guys probably wasn't the best idea, but it is what it is.
All right. I'm sure it's great. We got to stop doing the whole, oh, it wasn't that good. I'm sure it's fabulous. Let's hear it.
The full moon caused strange shadows on the hide of Angelica's tent. She willed her eyes to stay closed and sleep to come, but it refused. Her mind was full of Petra. Was God really asking her to give up on finding him? She felt the panic trying to rise into her throat. How could she possibly give up on him and just leave him to whatever fate Ivan had planned for him? Angelica rolled over, adjusting her furs, determined to fall asleep. She should have known better. She sat up. It was no use. She may as well go out and sit by the fire. She stared at her boots by the door, but made no move to get them. Chugiak watched her, his head on his paws, eyebrows raised. How do you feel about all this? Chugiak answered her by rolling on his back and pawing at her arm. Angelica scratched his tummy and laughed when his hind leg began to make involuntary scratching motions. With Chugiak's need for a belly rub satisfied, Angelica lay down once more, trying again to find a comfortable position. She let her eyelids fall closed and welcomed sleep to come. The still small voice in her head whispered to her, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" She immediately recognized the passage from Job. The next question naturally followed, though Angelica was unsure if it was her voice or not. Oh, if it was the voice or her. What makes you think if you aren't the one to save Petra, he can't be saved? Of course it was God who would save Petra. She knew that. Angelica sighed. I just thought it was me you'd called to do it. There was no answer this time, and after a few minutes, Angelica's eyes drooped closed again. Yeah.
Very good. That's not just a filler. Are you kidding me? That was really good.
Well, I mean that it was missing from like where it needed to be. It was
I see.
that it was missing as part of my story, and I hadn't realized it till I went and did a read through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, I need to write this scene that was in my notes, but I hadn't gotten written.
You know what I love most about this is that it is a God moment that isn't like as supernatural as some of the other things you write. Like there's no like opening of eyes and seeing spirit world around you. It is just how God speaks, often to all of us. And I really love that part.
Mm-hmm.
There is some inaccuracy in it though, because I've never met a dog that was ever satisfied with their belly rub. Like my dogs, you can't start because once you start, like there's no stopping. And then if one of them realizes that you're giving a belly rub, then they all want a belly rub. And I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
I'm just teasing. That was like really well done. I really enjoyed that.
I was at my daughter's house yesterday, and her one cat, who is like antisocial most of the time,
Uh-huh.
decided that she likes me all of a sudden. And so I was petting her, and she started purring, and then she rolled on her back. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, no, I'm not falling for that. And my son-in-law goes, nope, she'll bite you if you actually.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why cats do that. Like, I made a mental note to look that up. Why do cats roll on their back like they want you to rub their belly and then attack you when you do it?
I
Yeah.
think that you're mistaking their whatever they really mean for an invitation to pet them. It's kind of like, just because I take my sweater off and show you my upper arm doesn't mean I want you to squeeze my muscle. You know? Anyway, Jessica Glidden said, Tina, that was wonderful. I love the way you weave the lesson from the Bible in. Catherine Carroll said, so good, Tina. Liz Henderson, the still small voice. Yes, indeed. Gigi said, oh, Tina, I loved being in Angelica's thoughts, insomnia, and then Chugiak to the rescue.
Mhm.
Shelves said, so awesome, Tina. Love the quiet contemplation and invitation to trust God.
Thanks, guys.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, how do you describe the Holy Spirit speaking to somebody? Like, I spent way more time than I should have, like, thinking about that and trying to find a way to say it
I think
in other parts of my book.
Mm.
And I was like, why? When everybody knows what that still small voice is. And I can
Mhm.
just say that. It's what the Bible calls it.
Right, exactly. I think you did a good job.
All right. So again, we hope that you will take a crack at writing to this prompt. We want to encourage you to be a daily writer, or at least a more frequent writer than you currently are. Any opportunity you can take to stretch that writing muscle, you're doing something good for your writing career. Jen, right above Jen's head is a copy of our 100 days or 30 days of writing sprint prompts, and you can get that
was
on
like-
Amazon. Yes.
Wait. That's right.
And we'd love for you to work through that and develop a writing habit for yourself. Okay, so we're going to move on to the final segment of our show, which is the What's Next, where we find out what's next for everybody. Jen, I could see this look on your face of like, well, after I do this city, this city, this city, this city, this city. Yes.
Yes.
What's
But
going
I
on?
will say, with all the stuff I have going on, which is all good stuff, I'm so glad, like, you know, like 2 years, 3 years ago when COVID hit, like everything stopped, right? And I really learned to kind of like also enjoy just the downtime with my family, right? But it's all back in full force. My girls are like just doing lots of things, and it's all good stuff. And it's all most of it's church stuff, and like just, you know, I'm not complaining that I have to get up early tomorrow to take my daughter to Bible quizzing, because my daughter works every week studying the Bible, you know, my youngest child, you know, so, and the fact that my girls are going to the sing night. So I'm not bemoaning that. But I will say I have been editing.
Yay.
Not to the level that I used to back in the day, but I am like slowly but surely finding time to do it and falling back in love with this story. And I know I do love these characters. I think you guys are going to love these characters. So it's happening. So I'm just going to every day try to open up my document. That's my goal.
Very good. Very good. Tina?
Oh, aren't you supposed to go first? I'll go.
Oh, yeah, I guess I am. I guess I don't know what I'm going to say. Well, I have been very reliably from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock working on editing my book. And I'm so, like you said, Jen, it's really good. And I think Maria hinted at it too. When you go to work on your work and then you're like, oh, it's so good. And you can't wait to get it out there for someone else to experience. That's a really good feeling. And I'm very much feeling that about what I'm doing. It's also tricky work because it's kind of like refining. And the problem is you could phrase the sentence this way, you could phrase the sentence that way. And then the risk comes that you want to make the other choice the next time you open the document, right? But I'm finally to the place where I am really only having to go back as far as the work I did yesterday, and changes are not having to happen. So it's feeling really good. And I'm so super excited to be in chapter 7 of what's currently 32 chapters. So I'm really, really, really excited to get this out there to other people. I added song lyrics and they didn't exist. And I actually had a song that I made up stuck in my head while I was editing yesterday. And that was really fun. So I plan to continue to work on my book from 10 to 12. What's next for you, Tina?
Well, I have a really busy month coming up, and a lot of things going on. I got to do physical therapy for my knee, and it's that time of year where you got to do all the mammogram and all that stuff. But at the end of the month, I'm going to be on another podcast. I'm being interviewed.
Ooh.
And I just trying to, that's why I made you go, because I was trying to look up the name. I could not think of the name, but it's Between the Lines
Ooh.
podcast that I'm
Not Between the Lions, the show that I couldn't get my children to watch.
Lines. And she interviews Christian authors. So
wow, that's really exciting.
yeah, so I'm hoping, get my name out there with another influencer and maybe sell some books. And if I don't, and at least I'll maybe encourage other authors, because it's more about my author journey than my books.
I really want to come back to what you're saying, but I do have to tell this story. My oldest really liked to watch like Big Cat Diary. Like she was really into like lions and cheetahs. But she would not watch this Between the Lions show. And it was very much good for you, like learning how to read and everything. She was just like massively offended that they were puppets. Okay, anyway, back to.
I couldn't stand that show either. I'm right there with her.
So anyway, Tina, you've already recorded the podcast, or will it be a live?
No, we're recording it on the 23rd, so I'm not sure when it's going to air, because she doesn't do it live. She's going to record and then edit.
That's a big step in the author journey, to be a host on or a guest on a podcast.
We should do that more often.
Excited.
Yeah, we should do that more often. Like, there's probably lots of podcasts out there that like we could encourage others by being on there. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I might give us a little, it's publicity too. The podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's how she feels about that. I don't want to steal her thunder.
No, that's a given. Like if you go on, like you should be able to promote yourself. Every podcast lets you do that. So
yeah.
Okay, so Jess Glidden says, "What's next? I'm participating in a flash fiction February challenge. Daily writing is so much fun."
Oh,
that's
good for
awesome.
You, Jess. Yeah.
And Liz says, "What's next? Continuing drafting during at least one of my baby's naps every day." Aw, little baby tiger. All right. If you're new, you need to go back and watch last year's April Fool's Day episode. Yes,
absolutely. All right. So that's it, right? We covered it all. All right. Well, then, in that case, this concludes this episode of the Christian Indie Writers Podcast. And until next time, may your pen be prolific, your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ. Bye.
Bye.